Hello there, and welcome. Tonight, I invite you into a journey that is not rushed, not hurried, but one that unfolds slowly, like the steady rhythm of a drum echoing in the night. This is not a lecture filled with dates and dusty facts. It is more like a fire circle, where stories are told with pauses, silences, and gentle breaths in between. For in those pauses, the mind wanders, and in wandering, it begins to hear whispers that it might have otherwise missed. Imagine for a moment the sound of the evening outside your own window. Perhaps you hear distant traffic, perhaps the chirp of insects, or the steady hum of an appliance nearby. Let those sounds melt into the background. Let your body grow heavy, your breathing slower. Tonight, we are going to walk softly into the hidden secrets of the native peoples of the Americas, secrets that are not loud or boastful, but woven into the soil, the rivers, the songs, and the stars. For centuries, the native peoples were seen only through the eyes of those who conquered them, eyes that often refused to see. Their cities were dismissed, their knowledge called primitive, their stories erased. But if you listen with patience, if you lean close, you will begin to notice that what they left behind is not silence at all. It is a different language, one spoken in symbols carved into rock, in corn grown on terraced mountainsides, in dances that echo the rhythm of the cosmos. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture the continent long before ships with sails cut across the ocean. Picture vast forests, stretching beyond any horizon you know, mountains crowned with snow, deserts painted red under the sunday. In these landscapes lived countless nations, each with its own voice, its own truth, its own way of telling the universe who they were. Some built cities that glittered with canals and causeways. Others roamed with the bison, following the rhythm of migrations. Some whispered prayers to the eagle, others sang to the corn, others traced the stars as carefully as we trace lines in a book. To begin here is to begin with stillness. It is to honor that we are entering not just history, but memory. The memory of peoples whose wisdom often survives, not in monuments of stone, but in practices of living, in a worldview that insists the earth is alive, the sky is sacred, and every river carries a story. Their knowledge is not simply about survival, it is about relationship with each other, with the land, with the unseen. And so, in this first step of our long path together, we are not rushing into battles or empires or tragedies. We are sitting, like guests, at the edge of the fire. We are listening for the first heartbeat of the drum. We are noticing the way the smoke rises, carrying prayers upward, while our feet rest on the soil that has carried generations before us. As you settle into this journey, let the thought linger. The secrets of the native peoples are not truly secrets at all. They are reminders of how to walk gently on the earth, reminders of how to listen to voices older than your own, reminders that every human story is part of something larger, something woven deep into the roots of the world. So tonight, let us take that first breath together, slow, unhurried, like the earth itself breathing. Let us step quietly into the world of the native peoples, not as conquerors of knowledge, but as wanderers in search of wonder. The secrets are waiting, the night is long, and the journey has just begun. What if the native peoples of the Americas held keys to knowledge we have forgotten? Not just practical skills of farming or hunting, but something deeper, an understanding of how to live in rhythm with the earth, how to listen to the wind as if it were a teacher, how to see the stars as maps not only of space, but of spirit. It is easy to think we know the story. The textbooks tell us there were tribes, they lived simply, and then history swept them aside. But pause here, listen closely. History, as we usually read it, is a thin layer, like the surface of a drum. Beneath that surface, if you press your ear to it, you can feel vibrations that run far deeper. These vibrations are the questions that linger, questions that refuse to be silenced. Could it be that their cities were not mere villages, but sophisticated centers of science and ritual? Could it be that their songs contained mathematics, that their myths carried encoded astronomy, that their dances were as much maps as they were celebrations? Could it be that what we call legends were actually archives of wisdom, stored not in books, but in breath and memory? And then there is the silence of things erased. So many records burned, so many languages silenced, so many voices lost. Yet silence itself can hold secrets. Sometimes what is missing tells us more than what remains. A gap in a story is not emptiness. It is an invitation to wonder. Imagine standing at the edge of a great canyon at night, the sky above heavy with stars. You ask yourself, who was here before? What songs rose from this very place? Were the constellations we see tonight the same ones they saw? And if so, what names did they give them? What meaning did they carry? These questions are not meant to be answered quickly. They are meant to stay with you, like embers glowing long after the fire has gone out. They ask us to reconsider the way we define civilization, knowledge, and progress. They ask us to imagine that perhaps, just perhaps, the people we call ancient or primitive were holding truths that modern science is only now beginning to rediscover. The central question is not only about the past, it is about us, here, now. What have we overlooked in our rush to modernity? What wisdom lies waiting if we choose to listen to those who walked before us? And what might it mean if the most astonishing secrets of the native peoples are not lost at all, but living quietly woven into rituals, songs, and ways of seeing the world that still survive in corners of this vast continent? Let that question linger. Let it drift with you like smoke. Because it is not a question with a single answer. It is a door, and tonight we are choosing to step through it. Before we dive deeper, let's pause for a moment together. I'd like to ask you something small, something personal. Where are you listening from right now? Are you curled up in bed with the night pressing gently at your window? Are you in a quiet apartment where the hum of machines has become your evening lullaby? Or maybe you're in a place far from cities, where the only sounds are the rustle of leaves, the call of an owl, or the soft hush of the wind over grass. Wherever you are, allow yourself to feel the weight of this moment. You are not just a listener. You are part of the story. When we talk about the secrets of the native peoples, we are not talking about something locked away in museums or buried under ruins. We are talking about a way of seeing the world that can still reach you, right here, across time, across distance. Perhaps you are lying down, eyes half closed, letting these words drift in and out like waves. If so, let yourself sink a little deeper into stillness. Feel the rhythm of your breath inhale, exhale, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The people we are about to talk about also lived by rhythms, the turn of seasons, the cycles of the moon, the migrations of animals, the songs of rivers. When you breathe slowly now, you are aligning yourself with something ancient, something universal. And if you're listening while doing something else, let this be a soft background hum, a reminder that curiosity doesn't always need urgency. Sometimes the best discoveries arrive quietly, while you are not even looking for them. If this kind of journey feels soothing to you, if you find comfort in these calm explorations, I would be grateful if you shared this space with others. A simple like, a gentle subscription, a passing mention to a friend who also needs a quiet moment. That's how this circle grows. The more people gather around this fire of curiosity, the warmer and brighter it becomes. But no pressure. This is not a test, not an obligation. It is an invitation, an open hand. Just as the native peoples welcomed guests with food, stories, and ceremony, I welcome you to this shared moment of wonder. So take a breath, let your shoulders relax, and remember, you are not alone in this listening. Across countless homes, Across time zones, across night and day, there are others breathing with you, leaning into the same mystery. Together, we step into the next part of the story. Before the sails of Columbus cut across the ocean, before European boots pressed into new soil, the Americas were already alive, with stories older than memory. Imagine this vast continent as it was then. Forests stretching endlessly, rivers wide as seas, mountains crowned with eternal snow, and deserts painted in gold and crimson. This was not an empty land waiting to be discovered. It was a world filled with nations, each carrying its own language, its own map of the stars, its own way of belonging. In the north, great confederacies of tribes gathered around lakes so wide they looked like oceans. They built lodges, held councils, and told stories that tied them to the land as tightly as roots hold trees. In the plains, millions of bison thundered across the grasslands, and the people followed them, weaving their lives into the rhythm of hooves and seasons. In the forests of the east, longhouses stood, where families stretched across generations, and where decisions were made not with haste, but with patience, considering the impact on those yet unborn. Further south, empires rose. The Maya traced calendars with uncanny precision, their glyphs recording not just rulers, but the pulse of the cosmos. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan shimmered on its lake, causeways stretching across the water like arms embracing the horizon. And deep in the Andes, the Inca knit mountains together with roads and terraces, their empire running like veins across stone and sky. To call these places primitive is to close your eyes. Their cities rivaled those of Europe in size and splendor. Their systems of agriculture sustained millions without the aid of machines. Their art, carved into stone and painted in colors still bright after centuries, spoke of a world view where every mountain, every star, every drop of water was alive. But even beyond the grand empires, countless smaller nations flourished. Each valley, each river bend held people who knew its secrets. Hunters who could read the language of tracks, fishermen who knew the moods of tides, healers who carried entire pharmacies in memory, woven into chants and rituals. This was not wilderness, it was homeland. And above it all, there was a sense of belonging that bound people to place. To be born was to inherit not land as property, but land as kin. The soil was ancestor, the rivers were teachers, the sky was the ceiling of a sacred house. It is easy to imagine history beginning when ships appeared on the horizon. But pause here. Let your mind linger in this moment, before intrusion. Imagine standing on a cliff, looking down at a valley alive with smoke rising from cooking fires, with laughter, with children running, with elders telling stories. This was the Americas before conquest complex, vibrant, deeply human. And perhaps the greatest secret of all is that much of it is still here, if we choose to look, if we choose to listen. To understand the native peoples of the Americas, you must first step into their way of seeing. For them, the earth was not just ground beneath the feet, and the sky was not just empty air above. Both were alive. Both were filled with presence, intention, and mystery. The soil was a mother. It held seeds, nourished roots, and gave back food in seasons of plenty. When people planted corn, beans, and squash together, it was not only a clever agricultural method, it was a prayer, a partnership. The three sisters, as many tribes called them, were family plants that thrived by sharing. Corn grew tall, giving beans something to climb. Beans fixed nitrogen, enriching the soil. Squash spread wide, shading the earth and holding moisture. This was not farming in the way we usually think of it. It was ceremony written in the language of the land. The sky, too, was a teacher. Constellations were not simply patterns of light, but ancestors, animals, stories walking across the heavens. To the Navajo, the stars formed a sacred map. To the Maya, They became the clockwork of time itself, predicting eclipses and guiding rituals. For the Inca, the dark shapes in the Milky Way gaps between the stars were seen as animals of the earth, mirrored in the heavens. It was a sky filled not only with stars, but with meaning. Between earth and sky stretched the people, moving in rhythm with both. When rain fell, it was not only water but a blessing, the sky answering the prayers of the soil. When storms came, they were voices, warnings, sometimes punishments. And when the sun rose, it was more than light. It was a daily rebirth, a reminder that life itself is a cycle. Imagine for a moment standing in a wide plain at dawn. The horizon glows red. A circle is drawn in the sky by the sun, the same circle traced in ceremonies, in dances, in art. You feel the ground beneath your feet, solid, steady, yet alive with the memory of all who have walked before you. Above, the stars fade, but you know they have not gone. They are still watching. This is the world as the native peoples lived it, not divided into matter and spirit, but woven together. To them, the earth held secrets where to find medicine in roots, how to read the soil for rain, how to listen to the animals for signs of change. The sky held secrets too, when to plant, when to travel, when to prepare for trials ahead. And in both directions, upward and downward, there was always the reminder that humans were not masters here, only participants in a vast and breathing circle. It is easy in the modern world to see earth as property and sky as distance. But the native vision asks a gentler question. What if the land is alive? And what if the sky is speaking? What if every step you take and every star you see is part of a conversation older than memory? That is the secret from earth and sky. Not a puzzle to be solved, but a relationship to be remembered. When we think of great cities of the past, we often picture Rome with its arches, Athens with its temples, or the pyramids of Egypt rising like steps into eternity. Yet, long before European ships reached the shores of the Americas, cities of equal wonder were already here, breathing with life, crowned with art, and built with a wisdom that often slips through the cracks of history. These were not scattered villages clinging to survival. They were vast urban hearts, pulsing with trade, ceremony, and memory cities that time has since tried to cover with silence. Take Cahokia, for instance. Resting near the Mississippi River, it was once home to tens of thousands of people. Long earthen mounds rose like pyramids, shaping a skyline that astonished the first outsiders who glimpsed them. At its height, Cahokia was larger than London. The central plaza could have held entire gatherings of dancers, merchants, and storytellers. Yet today, only grassy ridges remain, and most passers-by never realize they are walking over the bones of a metropolis. Farther south, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan shimmered like a dream, built upon a lake, its causeways stretched like ribbons of stone across the water. Canals cut through the city, carrying canoes heavy with flowers, food, and trade. Spanish conquistadors, hardened by war, described it with astonishment. They wrote that no European city could match its beauty or order. Imagine standing at its heart, towers glistening, markets bustling, gardens floating like islands on the water. And then imagine it gone, destroyed in fire and blood, leaving only fragments of memory. High in the Andes, the Inca built Machu Picchu, a city that still clings to the clouds. Terraces hug the mountain, drinking in the rain. Stones cut so precisely fit together without mortar, surviving earthquakes that shattered later empires. For centuries, it lay hidden, veiled by jungle, until rediscovered in the early 20th century. To stand there is to feel not only awe, but humility, as if the mountains themselves had chosen to reveal one secret and keep countless others. And then there are the countless cities we barely know. The Maya left us stone temples, that rise like stairways into the sky. But beneath the forests of Guatemala and Belize lie ruins still untouched, swallowed by roots and shadows. Archaeologists using laser technology have begun to reveal vast networks of roads, temples, and reservoirs, suggesting a civilization that was not isolated splendor but interconnected brilliance. These cities remind us of something important. Civilization in the Americas was not a pale shadow of Europe. It was its own creation, born from the land, guided by stars, written in stone and soil. Yet many were erased, not just by time, but by deliberate forgetting. Colonizers burned libraries, tore down temples, replaced plazas with cathedrals. They wanted the world to believe that nothing had existed here before. But listen carefully. Even buried cities whisper. In the layout of mounds, in the carvings left behind, in the myths carried by descendants, there are still stories waiting. Stories of architects who aligned structures with solstices, stories of engineers who moved rivers, stories of priests and healers who saw cities as mirrors of the cosmos. So tonight, let us pause and honor these lost cities. Not lost because they disappeared, but lost because we chose not to see. Their remnants are still here. Their echoes still rise when the wind crosses ancient plazas. And if you close your eyes, you might almost hear footsteps on stone, voices chanting to the sky, and the hum of a city that refuses to be forgotten. If a people's monuments can be toppled, and their cities buried under soil, what still carries their soul forward? For the native peoples of the Americas, the answer lies in their languages, their stories, their myths, whispered from parent to child across centuries. Stone may crack, libraries may burn, but words carried in breath endure. Imagine a night inside a longhouse, firelight flickering across carved beams. Children sit close, eyes wide, while an elder begins to speak. The language is one you may not know, its rhythms different, its sounds strange and beautiful, but even without translation you feel its power. Each word is not just a word, it is a seed planted in memory. The story might be about a coyote trickster, about a star that fell to earth, about a hero who journeyed through the underworld. To the children, it is entertainment. To the community, it is identity. To the world, it is wisdom hidden in plain sight. Across the Americas, hundreds of languages once thrived. Some were complex enough to weave poetry that rivaled Shakespeare. Others carried philosophies about balance, respect, and the sacredness of life. In Nahuatl, the language of the Aztec, the word in Xochitl, in Cucutl, flower and song, meant poetry, truth expressed not with arguments, but with beauty. Among the Lakota, prayers were spoken with the phrase Mitakuye Oyasing, meaning all my relations, a reminder that every being, animal, plant, river, star, is family. Their myths were not simple fables. They were maps. Some guided hunters across landscapes. Others explained the stars and seasons. Still others taught moral lessons about greed, humility, or courage. To the Haudenosaunee, the sky woman who fell to earth gave birth to creation itself. To the Maya, the hero twins descended into the underworld, defeated death, and rose again as the sun and moon. To the Inca, their first ancestors emerged from caves, guided by the sun god Inti. These stories were never meant to sit still. They lived only when spoken, sung, or danced. A myth was not trapped in ink. It was alive, reshaped with every telling. The teller added a gesture, a pause, a new detail fitted to the moment. In this way, language itself became a river, flowing without ever drying, carrying history forward even when armies tried to dam its course. But history has not been kind. Many of these languages were silenced by forced children taken to schools, where they were punished for speaking their mother tongues, elders shamed into silence. And yet, even in whispers, the words survived. Today, revival movements are bringing them back, with songs sung again, dictionaries written, young people learning the words their grandparents were forbidden to speak. To listen to these languages is to hear the world anew. English or Spanish may describe the earth as it, but many native tongues call the earth she. In English, a river flows. In other tongues, the river sings, listens, and carries memory. This difference is not just grammar, it is worldview. It is philosophy embedded in sound. So when we speak of secrets, perhaps one of the greatest is this: the native peoples did not only build cities of stone, they built cities of words, invisible but enduring, where every syllable was a home for memory. And those cities are still standing if we take the time to listen. In every forest, on every plain, in every desert of the Americas, the native peoples carried with them not only stories, but an intimate knowledge of the living world. To them, plants were not mute. Each root, each leaf, each flower had a voice, a medicine, a lesson. They did not separate healing from the land, it was the land that healed. Imagine a healer at dawn, walking barefoot through dew-wet grass. She pauses at a cluster of plants, whispers a prayer, and gathers them gently, never taking more than needed. In her hands, a simple root becomes a cure for fever, a bark becomes relief for pain, a flower becomes a balm for the spirit. She does not consult books. Her library is the earth itself, and her education is memory passed down through generations. Anthropologists estimate that native peoples used more than 2,000 species of plants for medicine. Willow bark, long before aspirin, was used to ease pain. Tobacco, in sacred rituals, became not just smoke, but a bridge to the spirit world. The leaves of coca in the Andes offered energy and breath at high altitudes. In the Amazon, shamans brewed potions from vines and leaves that seemed ordinary, yet opened the mind to visions and healing beyond comprehension. But this knowledge was not just chemistry. It was philosophy. Healing was never only about the body. It was about restoring balance between the sick and the community, between the person and the earth, between the human spirit and the spirits of nature. Illness was sometimes seen as imbalance, as forgetting your place in the circle of life. The cure, then, was not only a plant, but a song, not only a drink, but a ceremony. Picture a night by firelight. A sick child lies wrapped in blankets, fevered. The healer chants softly, shaking a rattle filled with seeds. The family gathers close, their voices joining. Outside, the wind rustles leaves as if listening. A mixture of herbs is given, but so too is reassurance, rhythm, and the belief that the earth itself bends toward healing. To modern science, this may look like ritual, but science itself has begun to confirm what was once dismissed, that community, song, and belief can shape the body as powerfully as medicine. Yet, much of this wisdom was nearly lost. Colonizers often saw native healers as witches, their knowledge as dangerous. Ceremonies were banned, plants uprooted, songs silenced. And still, the knowledge persisted hidden in whispers, carried in secret gardens, passed from grandmother to granddaughter. Today, researchers rediscover what was always known. Modern pharmaceuticals trace their roots back to these traditions. Quinine for malaria came from Andean bark. Curare, once a hunting poison, taught doctors how to create muscle relaxants. Even now, scientists search the Amazon for cures, knowing that the true experts are the shamans who walk beneath its canopy. The secret here is not only the plants, it is the relationship. To heal was to respect, to take with gratitude, to give back. A leaf was not a tool but a partner. A root was not property but kin. And perhaps the deepest wisdom of all is this: health was never about conquering illness, but about remembering the harmony between the body, the spirit, and the living earth. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the scent of crushed leaves, the taste of bitter bark, the low hum of voices singing in the dark. That is the medicine of the native peoples, ancient, gentle, enduring, waiting quietly beneath our feet. When we think of architecture, we often imagine it as walls and roofs, as structures built to shelter and protect. But for the native peoples of the Americas, architecture was more than utility. It was ceremony in stone. It was mathematics carved into earth. It was the sky brought down to meet the ground. Their cities, their temples, their monuments were not only homes for humans, they were mirrors of the cosmos. Consider Chichen Itza, the great Maya city. Its pyramid, El Castillo, was not just a staircase of stone. On the equinox, shadows fall in such a way that a serpent of light seems to slither down its steps, an illusion of precision, a marriage of architecture and astronomy. The builders did not simply stack stone. They built with the heavens in mind, creating a calendar of light and shadow that still astonishes us today. Farther south in the Andes, the Inca aligned their cities with mountains and stars. Cusco, their capital, was laid out in the shape of a puma, a sacred animal of strength. Temples opened to the rising sunday. Stones were cut so precisely they fit without mortar, surviving earthquakes that crumbled colonial cathedrals. Each terrace carved into the mountain was not only agriculture, it was geometry, a way of blending human life with the contours of the earth. And in the deserts of Peru, the Nazca etched enormous figures into the ground lines so vast they can only be fully seen from the sky. Hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, spirals, drawn on a canvas of sand. Were they messages to the gods? Astronomical maps? Ritual pathways? Even now, we cannot be certain. But what is clear is that these were not random drawings. They were deliberate, monumental, and meant to be seen by more than human eyes. In North America, earthworks and mounds rose with equal precision. The Serpent Mound in Ohio coils across the land like a giant snake, its curves aligned with solstices and lunar cycles. To walk its length is to walk through a calendar of the sky, traced in soil. Cahokia's great mounds once towered above the Mississippi plains, their placements echoing cosmic patterns. This union of architecture and astronomy reveals something profound. To the native peoples, buildings were not separate from the universe, they were part of it. A temple was a mountain. A plaza was a reflection of the heavens. A doorway could be an axis between worlds. They built not to dominate nature, but to converse with it. Imagine standing before one of these monuments at dawn. The first rays of sunlight strike a stone exactly as intended hundreds of years ago. The shadow aligns, the pattern completes, the design speaks. In that moment, you feel the breath of those who built it, their eyes raised to the same sky, their hands shaping earth and stone to honor something far greater than themselves. The secret here is not only the stones themselves, but the knowledge behind them, knowledge of cycles, of seasons, of celestial patterns that required patience across generations. Knowledge that turned the world itself into a book of time, written not in ink, but in architecture. And perhaps the greatest wonder is this: many of these monuments still stand, still aligned, still whispering their truths, waiting for us to look not only with our eyes, but with our imagination. When we picture strength, we often think of warriors with weapons, of leaders with crowns, of empires stretching far across the land. But for the native peoples of the Americas, true strength was not measured by conquest or monuments alone. It was measured in the quiet power of community, the invisible fabric of trust, reciprocity, and responsibility that held people together through storms, famines, and centuries of change. In many nations, decisions were not made by one voice alone. Councils gathered, sometimes lasting for days, until every perspective had been heard. Among the Haudenosaunee, known as the Iroquois Confederacy, democracy thrived long before the word reached European tongues. Chiefs were chosen not for wealth or power, but for wisdom, patience, and the ability to listen. Women, too, held vital roles. Clan mothers had the authority to appoint and remove leaders. The health of the community mattered more than the ambition of any one individual. Sharing was not charity, it was duty. In villages of the plains, a successful hunt was not the possession of a single hunter. Meat was divided, given first to the elders, to families in need, to those unable to hunt. No one went hungry if the community thrived. Among the Pueblo, stored grain was considered collective wealth, guarded not by soldiers but by custom, ensuring survival through lean years. Rituals reinforced this sense of belonging. Dances were not performances for entertainment, but acts of renewal, binding the people together in movement and song. Ceremonies marked the turn of seasons, reminding all that survival depended not on solitary effort, but on harmony between neighbors, between clans, between generations. Imagine a circle of people around a fire. Food is shared, stories are told, decisions are weighed. Children run between the legs of elders, laughter echoing in the dark. There is no division between sacred and ordinary here. The act of sitting together, of eating together, of deciding together, is itself sacred. This is the strength of community ordinary moments transformed into the foundation of endurance. And yet, this sense of communal strength did not make the societies fragile. On the contrary, it gave them resilience. When drought struck, people adapted together. When invaders came, alliances formed across tribes. When disease threatened, knowledge was shared in hope of survival. Community was not just a social structure, it was a shield. Contrast this with the world we often know today, where isolation can feel heavy, where the self is praised above the group. The native vision offers a reminder: we are strongest, not when standing alone, but when standing with others. Perhaps that is the greatest secret hidden here, that the wealth of a people is not in gold or conquest, but in the invisible ties of care, cooperation, and memory. The empires of Europe rose and fell with kings. The communities of the native peoples endured through kinship. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel yourself as part of that circle. Firelight on your face, the murmur of voices around you, food passed into your hands. That warmth is not just from the flames. It is from belonging. It is from community. Every culture carries its stories of beginnings and endings, of journeys between life and death. For the native peoples of the Americas, the cosmos was not divided into a single heaven above and an earth below. Instead, it was layered worlds stacked one upon another, with humans moving between them through myth, ritual, and sometimes vision. To the Maya, beneath the surface of the earth, stretched Xibalba, the underworld, a place of trials and tests. It was not simply punishment, it was a realm of challenge, where heroes proved their strength, wit, and courage. The hero twins descended into Xibalba to face the lords of death, playing ball games that were more than games, outwitting forces that sought to destroy them, and in triumph rising again as the sun and moon. The story was not only myth, it was an explanation of why the sun returns after darkness, why death is followed by life, why endings carry the seed of beginnings. Among the Hopi of the American Southwest, the world we live in now was not the first. They tell of emerging from a sipapu, a small opening that connects this world to those below. Each previous world ended by fire, by ice, by flood, because people had lost balance with nature and spirit. Only by guidance from the spirits did humans climb into a new world, carrying lessons of humility. The sipapu, even today, is honored as a portal, a reminder of humanity's fragile place in the cosmic order. The Inca too spoke of caves and underworld passages. Their ancestors, they said, emerged from Pacaratambo, a place of origin, guided by the sun god Inti. To journey into caves was to journey back to the womb of the earth, to touch the memory of creation. Mountains, rivers, and caves were not inert. They were living thresholds, places where one could enter into communion with other realms. And for the Haudenosaunee, the sky woman fell from above, landing on the back of a great turtle where land was spread to form the earth. Yet beneath, waters still held power, deep and mysterious. The world below and the world above were always in dialogue, joined by the middle place where humans walk. Imagine yourself by a fire, listening as an elder lowers their voice, speaking of spirits that dwell beneath rivers, of animals that move between worlds, of dreams that are not only dreams, but visits to other realms. These stories were not told for entertainment alone. They were maps, spiritual geographies, teaching people how to live, how to respect what they could not see, how to remember that existence was never flat but layered, alive with unseen neighbors. The world below was not simply feared. It was respected. It was where ancestors rested, where lessons were learned, where renewal was prepared. To live was to walk a bridge between sky and earth, between life and death, between the visible and invisible. And perhaps that is the quiet wisdom here. What we call myth may be less about fantasy and more about orientation, a way to remind every generation that life is not only what we see, but also what lies hidden beneath our feet, beyond our eyes, and within our dreams. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sound of a drum. Not a fast, restless beat, but a slow, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth itself. That rhythm is where much of native life began. For music among the peoples of the Americas was never simply art. It was prayer, memory, and a bridge between worlds. In many traditions, the drum was sacred. Its circle mirrored the circle of the sun, the moon, and the seasons. Its skin stretched tight was said to carry a spirit, so that when struck, it did not merely make sound, it spoke. The heartbeat of the drum called dancers into step, invited ancestors to listen, and reminded the living of their place in the great circle of being. Alongside drums came flutes, carved from wood or bone. Their tones drifted like birdsong, haunting and delicate, echoing through canyons or forests at dusk. The flute was not just for music. It was for calling rain, for healing, sometimes for love. To hear a flute's whisper across the night was to feel the invisible threads that bind earth and sky. Songs were more than melodies. They were vessels of memory. A single chant could carry the story of creation, the lineage of a clan, or the instructions for a ritual that ensured the return of the Sunday. Some songs were gifts, said to be received in dreams or visions from the spirits. Once given, they became communal treasures, repeated generation after generation, so that memory itself never died. And with music came dance. Picture a circle of people moving in rhythm, feet striking earth in unison. The circle turns, arms lift, bodies sway. Each movement is not just choreography, it is invocation. To dance was to honor the wind, the corn, the animals, the ancestors. In the Great Plains, the sun dance bound entire communities together, dancers enduring pain and sacrifice for the renewal of life. In the Southwest, Kachina dances brought masked figures into villages, embodying spirits who blessed crops and children. Ceremonies stitched music, dance, and ritual into a single fabric. Firelight, smoke, chanting, feathers, and painted faces created a world where the ordinary dissolved and the sacred stepped close. These were not occasional entertainments. They were lifelines. Through them, people kept balance with nature, remembered their duties, and recharged the bonds of community. Even today, powwows across North America echo those older rhythms. Drums thunder in circles, dancers in regalia swirl, songs rise in many tongues. They are not relics, but living threads, carrying ancient strength into modern times. Perhaps the secret hidden here is this: music and ritual were never separable from survival. They taught patience, unity, and reverence. They reminded each person that they were part of something vast. And maybe, in our own restless world, to sit with a drum beat, to let a flute's note drift through silence, is to remember that life itself is music, always moving, always echoing, always sacred. If survival was the first task of every people, then agriculture was the first science. And for the native peoples of the Americas, farming was never only about food. It was about partnership with soil, with water, with sun, and with time itself. What they discovered and cultivated would feed not only their own nations, but, in time, the entire world. Consider maize or corn. Before European contact, wild grasses in Mesoamerica were slowly transformed through centuries of patient selection. What began as tiny kernels became the golden ears we know today. Corn was more than a crop, it was life itself, appearing in myths as the flesh of humanity. Entire calendars were organized around its planting and harvest. Alongside corn grew beans and squash, the three sisters, a living experiment in companion planting. Each supported the other, proving that wisdom can be written not in books, but in fields. In the Andes, the Inca carved terraces into mountainsides, transforming steep slopes into steppes of abundance. These terraces conserved water, prevented erosion, and created microclimates where different crops could thrive. Potatoes, thousands of varieties were nurtured here, adapted to every altitude. Quinoa, amaranth, and other grains sustained millions. Stone channels carried snowmelt from peaks into valleys, an irrigation system so precise it still functions today. North America had its own agricultural revolutions. Along the Mississippi, Cahokia's fields stretched outward, supporting a city larger than many in medieval Europe. In the southwest, the Pueblo people engineered canals and dryland techniques to coax crops from deserts. Farther north, tribes cultivated wild rice in lakes, canoeing out to harvest its bounty, feeding communities through long winters. But agriculture was not only technical, it was spiritual. Planting was often accompanied by songs and rituals. Asking permission from the soil, giving thanks to the Sunday seeds were not seen as objects, but as relatives' gifts entrusted to human care. The act of farming was not domination of nature, but collaboration. What is most astonishing is how global their discoveries became. From the Americas came corn, potatoes, tomatoes, peanuts, cacao, chili peppers, foods now central to diets across the world. Imagine Italian cuisine without tomatoes, Irish history without potatoes, Asian curries without chilies, Swiss chocolate without cacao. The truth is, native agricultural science reshaped the very flavor of humanity. And yet, much of this brilliance was overlooked. Early colonizers saw the abundance, but not the method. They ate the fruits, but dismissed the knowledge. Fields that had been carefully managed for generations were taken, their wisdom erased from records. Still, the crops carried forward, quiet ambassadors of forgotten farmers. Today, scientists are rediscovering what was always known, that biodiversity, crop rotation, soil care, and water balance are not modern inventions but ancient practices. The terraces still cling to Andean slopes. Seeds still rest in earthen pots, kept safe by communities who remember. The secret here is this: agriculture was never only about feeding the body. It was about feeding the future. The native peoples planted not only for themselves, but for generations unborn. Every seed was a promise, every harvest a renewal, every field a lesson in how to live with the earth rather than against it. So when you bite into a potato, taste chocolate, or sip coffee blended with maize, you are tasting the science of ancestors, farmers who worked not in laboratories, but under sun and sky, with patience as their greatest tool. When we hear the word warrior, it is easy to imagine steel armor, clashing swords, or armies marching in formation. But among the native peoples of the Americas, the idea of the warrior was much deeper, much more spiritual. A warrior was not only a fighter, a warrior was a protector, a guardian of balance, a bridge between the living community and the unseen world of spirit. Among the Plains tribes, young men became warriors not only by learning to hunt or wield weapons, but by passing through visions. They sought solitude on hilltops, fasting, praying, waiting for dreams that would reveal their totems, their guiding spirits. A warrior did not fight alone. He carried with him the power of the animals and ancestors who walked beside him. To wear feathers of an eagle was not decoration, it was to carry the vision of the sky. To paint the face with certain colors was not vanity, it was to become a vessel of spiritual force. In battle, courage was measured not by how many enemies were slain, but by how one faced danger. To count coup, to touch an enemy with a hand or a stick without killing, was considered a greater act of bravery than striking with lethal force. For courage was proof of spirit, and a warrior's honor came from protecting life, not destroying it. Among the Aztec, the image of the warrior was woven into the cosmos itself. The sun, they believed, needed nourishment to rise each day. Warriors taken in battle became offerings, their sacrifice ensuring the continuation of the world. Though grim in our eyes, it reflected a world view where the warrior was bound not just to his people, but to the very heartbeat of the universe. The Inca too linked warriors with the sacred. Soldiers marched across mountains carrying images of the sun god Inti. To die in battle was to be embraced by the divine. Warfare was never separate from ritual. Before combat, ceremonies were held, prayers spoken, dances performed to align human strength with cosmic order. But not all warriors carried weapons. Women, too, in many nations, stood as protectors of home and spirit. They defended villages, but also guarded traditions, languages, and songs. To raise a child in wisdom was its own form of battle. To keep memory alive, when the world sought to erase it, was an act of profound courage. Imagine, for a moment, standing in a circle of warriors before dawn. They paint their faces, tie feathers into their hair, sing low chants. The fire crackles. The stars overhead fade slowly as the horizon grows pale. This is not only preparation for battle, it is a ceremony of belonging. Each warrior steps forward, not as an individual, but as a spirit-bound protector of their people, their land, and their ancestors. The secret here is that for the native peoples, the warrior's path was never about glory alone. It was about service. To fight was to protect children, to defend the balance of the earth, to keep the sacred stories alive. Even death was not an end, but a transformation. The warrior's soul joining the great circle of spirits that continued to watch over the living. And perhaps that is the wisdom we can carry with us now. To be a warrior is not only to face enemies, but to face hardship with dignity, to defend what is sacred with patience, and to walk always with the spirits of those who came before. To the native peoples of the Americas, life was not divided into human versus nature, sacred versus ordinary, spirit versus body. Instead, everything was woven together into one great fabric, a circle of existence where each being tree, river, mountain, animal, star was a relative, not a resource. Their philosophy was not to dominate the world, but to live in harmony with it. Among the Lakota, a simple phrase captures this world view: Mitakuye Oyazing, all my relations. These words were not poetry alone. They were a declaration of reality. To speak them was to acknowledge that the bird above, the stone beneath, the water flowing, and the person beside you were all bound in kinship. Every action, whether hunting, planting, or building, was done with the awareness that it rippled through the circle of relations. Ownership, in the Western sense, held little meaning. Land was not property to be bought and sold, but a gift to be cared for, shared, and passed down. The Haudenosaunee taught that every decision should consider the impact on the seventh generation to come. Imagine such a philosophy today. Every law, every invention, every act, weighed not just for the present, but for descendants who would inherit its consequences. In the Andes, the Inca believed in Aini, the principle of reciprocity. What you give, you receive. To take from the earth, without giving back, was to break the balance. Thus, rituals of offering accompanied planting and harvest. A few drops of chicha, a traditional drink, were poured onto the ground before drinking. It was a gesture, small but profound, a reminder that the earth must be nourished as it nourishes us. Even survival was shaped by harmony. Hunters spoke prayers before taking an animal, thanking it for its sacrifice. Fishermen returned the first catch to the river. Farmers let fields rest, respecting the soil's need for renewal. This was not superstition but sustainability, born of centuries of attention. To live in harmony also meant listening. The rustle of leaves, the call of birds, the shift of clouds, these were not background noise, but messages. Nature spoke, and people listened. A sudden silence in the forest might signal danger. The return of certain flowers meant planting time. Even dreams were seen as conversations with the natural and spiritual worlds. Contrast this with the modern view, where the earth is often reduced to resource, sky to emptiness, rivers to commodities. The native vision offers a gentler truth, that our survival depends not on control, but on relationship. To harm the land is to harm ourselves. To honor it is to find balance. Imagine yourself walking through a forest at dusk. The air cools, shadows lengthen, birds call to one another. Each sound, each scent, each flicker of light is part of a larger conversation. You are not separate. You are included. You belong. That was and is the heart of native philosophy. The secret here is not complex. It is as simple as respect. To live with harmony is to remember that the world is alive, that we are kin to all we see, and that peace begins not in conquering, but in belonging. In many native traditions, strength did not rest only with warriors or chiefs. It also flowed quietly, steadily, through the women, the keepers of hearth and memory, the ones who carried both life and knowledge forward. To speak of native peoples without honoring their women is to miss half the heartbeat of their world. Among the Haudenosaunee, clan mothers held the power to choose and remove chiefs. Leadership was not a crown to be seized, but a trust bestowed by women who carried the wisdom of families. Their voices guided councils, ensuring that decisions considered not only the present, but the well-being of future generations. In a time when European societies often silenced women, here they were respected as political pillars. In the pueblos of the Southwest, women tended fields of corn, beans, and squash, but their role was more than agricultural. They were guardians of ritual, singers of songs, painters of pottery that bore sacred symbols. Each vessel, each woven cloth carried stories, prayers, and identity. Art was not decoration, it was memory in tangible form, often crafted by women's hands. The Inca revered Mama Quilla, the moon goddess, protector of women and marriage. Festivals honored her light, her rhythms guiding the cycles of planting and fertility. In everyday life, Andean women passed down remedies of herbs, taught children to spin wool and weave patterns, and maintained household shrines where offerings kept harmony with the gods. But beyond roles of nurture, women were also warriors in spirit. They defended their people when threatened, stood as mediators in conflict, and preserved language in times of silence. When colonization sought to erase native tongues, women whispered lullabies to children in the forbidden languages, ensuring survival through song. When ceremonies were outlawed, women disguised rituals as daily chores, carrying tradition like a hidden flame. Imagine a grandmother by firelight, her hands wrinkled, her voice steady. She teaches her granddaughter to grind corn, each movement accompanied by words in an ancient tongue. The child repeats them, not knowing yet that she is preserving a treasure. In that kitchen, in that moment, history survives. Even today, Native women lead struggles for land rights, for water protection, for cultural renewal. They stand at rivers holding banners. They sing songs at protests. They heal communities fractured by centuries of displacement. They are continuity itself, threads woven across past, present, and future. The secret here is that survival was never only about battles or tools. It was about nurture, resilience, memory, all carried in the hands and voices of women. Their strength was often quiet, but it was unbreakable, flowing like rivers that shape valleys over time. Close your eyes and imagine that strength. The warmth of a mother's lullaby, the firmness of a grandmother's hand, the wisdom in a sister's counsel. That is the power of Native women, life-givers, tradition keepers, and guardians of worlds both seen and unseen. Behind the beauty of stories, the brilliance of agriculture, and the rhythm of ceremonies lies a shadow that cannot be ignored. The history of Native peoples in the Americas is also a history of silencing, of erasure, of wounds hidden beneath layers of time, of tragedies so vast that they were nearly swallowed by silence. When European ships arrived, they did not come with curiosity alone. They came with steel, with guns, with hunger for gold and land. But perhaps the most devastating weapon they carried was invisible: disease. Smallpox, measles, influenza illnesses, unknown to the Americas, swept through villages, striking with such speed and force that whole communities vanished before invaders even set foot there. Some historians estimate that up to 90% of the native population perished in a single century. Imagine the grief: entire languages silenced, entire traditions extinguished, entire worlds gone in the span of a few generations. And yet, even this catastrophe was not the end. Colonization was not only physical, but cultural. Libraries of Maya codices were burned, their glyphs, repositories of centuries of knowledge, reduced to ash. Ceremonies were outlawed, drums silenced, sacred dances forbidden. Children were taken from families, placed in schools where their hair was cut, their names changed, their languages punished. They were told to forget who they were. The land itself was seized. Fields carefully tended for centuries were claimed, forests cut, rivers dammed. Treaties were made and broken, again and again, as native nations were pushed onto smaller and smaller reservations. The very ground that had been kin was treated as commodity. But perhaps the deepest tragedy is how these stories were told, or rather, how they were not told. For centuries, mainstream histories spoke of the Americas as if they were discovered by Europeans, as if the people who had lived there for thousands of years were invisible. Their achievements were dismissed as primitive, their suffering erased, their voices unheard. The narrative of conquest became the dominant story, leaving the true cost hidden in shadows. Yet silence is never complete. In the margins of records, in oral traditions carried by survivors, in the memories of elders, the truth endures. The Baikich, the great tragedy, was not only loss of life, but the attempt to erase identity itself, and still, the identity resisted. Imagine standing at the site of an old mission, where once children were forced to pray in languages not their own. Now, descendants return, singing songs in the tongues of their ancestors, reclaiming what was nearly taken. Imagine walking through a museum where broken pottery is displayed as artifact, yet outside, artisans still shape clay, painting patterns alive with meaning. These are acts of defiance, acts of survival. The secret here is that while much was stolen, much also survived hidden in lullabies, in prayers whispered quietly, in seeds saved in pockets, in dances performed under the gaze of stars rather than colonizers. The tragedy is immense, but so too is the endurance. To remember these, by kick, is not to dwell in despair. It is to honor the truth, to say that these lives mattered, these voices mattered, and their silencing cannot be the final word. For even in the darkest shadows, the people carried light, and that light, though nearly extinguished, still burns. Through ice and desert, forest and mountain, the native peoples of the Americas carried with them not only traditions, but an astonishing ability to endure. Survival was not just necessity. It was a form of wisdom, a dialogue with the land. Every season brought new trials, yet each trial revealed the resilience of communities who knew that life could be fragile, but also endlessly adaptive. In the far north, the Inuit shaped existence against the bitter cold. They built igloos from snow, turning frozen air into warm shelter. They carved kayaks, sleek enough to slice through icy waters. Every part of a hunted seal was used: meat for food, fat for light, skins for clothing, bones for tools. Waste was impossible in such a landscape. Survival depended on reverence. Even in silence, the Inuit read the language of snowdrifts, winds, and stars, crafting lives where others would see only desolation. In the arid deserts of the southwest, the Pueblo and Hohokam peoples coaxed water from dryness. They dug canals that carried lifelines across sand, engineered systems to store precious rain, and built homes from clay that stayed cool in summer, warm in winter. Their survival was not accidental. It was architectural genius, shaped by patience and communal effort. On the Great Plains, mobility was strength. Nations followed the bison herds, their teepees designed to be carried and rebuilt with ease. Nothing was static, for the people understood that life itself was movement. A single bison offered food, shelter, tools, and clothing. And when the herds thundered across the horizon, they did not only feed bodies, they fed ceremonies, dances, and songs that bound entire nations together. High in the Andes, the Inca created staircases of stone against mountainsides, where potatoes, maize, and quinoa flourished at impossible altitudes. Rope bridges of woven grass stretched across chasms, renewed each year by communal hands. To climb those mountains was to breathe thin air, but to live there was to prove that ingenuity could make even the harshest heights habitable. And deep in the Amazon, survival meant intimacy with the forest. Tribes knew which leaves soothed fevers, which vines gave water, which animals signaled rain. The jungle was not chaos to them, it was a vast library. Each plant was a page, each bird a voice, each stream a chapter of survival knowledge. But survival was never just about tools or techniques. It was about mindset. To face hunger, storm, or invasion required not only skill, but spirit. Songs lifted hearts during long winters. Stories reminded children that endurance was possible. Rituals made survival more than scraping by, they transformed it into continuity, into belonging. Even under conquest, when land was stolen and families torn apart, survival became resistance. People hid seeds to plant again. They whispered forbidden words to children. They carried ceremonies in memory, waiting for the day they could rise again. Survival was not passive, it was active defiance, a quiet flame carried through centuries. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a snowfield, or a desert, or a rainforest. To survive there alone seems impossible, but the native peoples not only survived, they flourished. They sang, they built, they danced, they remembered. That is the true strength of survival, not simply to endure, but to live with dignity, with knowledge, and with hope. The secret here is that survival is not brute force. It is relationship, patience, and wisdom. And in the heartbeat of native peoples, survival was never an end, it was a promise to the generations yet to come. For the native peoples of the Americas, animals were never only creatures to be hunted or admired. They were teachers, guides, guardians, and kin. Each species carried a lesson, each encounter was a dialogue, and every hunt was a sacred exchange. In their stories, animals walked as ancestors, as tricksters, as companions of the spirit world. To speak of animals was to speak of relationships, not of dominance. The eagle soared closest to the sun, its wings cutting through light itself. For many nations, it was a messenger, carrying prayers from earth to sky. Eagle feathers were honored as sacred gifts, worn in ceremonies not as decoration but as bridges to the divine. To hold one was to hold courage, vision, and the clarity of heights unseen. The wolf walked another path, strength in community. To the plains, peoples, wolves were admired for hunting together, for loyalty to their pack, for survival in harsh lands. Warriors looked to wolves for lessons in endurance, in courage, in the silent wisdom of moving as one. To dream of a wolf was to be reminded that no person survives alone. The bear embodied power and healing. Its strength was unmatched, yet it also knew the art of retreat, hibernating through winter, emerging with the thaw. For healers, the bear became a symbol of medicine, its claws worn as talismans, its spirit invoked in rituals of health. To walk with the bear spirit was to learn courage and also patience. The serpent, feared and revered, was a creature of transformation. Shedding its skin, it taught renewal, the cycle of death and rebirth. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was a god of wisdom, creation, and wind, a reminder that even what crawls on the earth can rise to the heavens. The bison thundered across the plains, not only as food, but as life itself. Every part was used: meat for nourishment, hides for shelter, bones for tools. To kill a bison carelessly was unthinkable. Ceremonies honored the animal's spirit, thanking it for its sacrifice. To the people, the bison was not only herd, it was provider, ancestor, sacred relative. Even smaller beings carried meaning. The coyote, clever trickster, appeared in countless tales, teaching through mischief, reminding humans not to take themselves too seriously. The hummingbird, swift and tireless, symbolized joy and persistence. The turtle carried the world on its back in the stories of the Haudenosaunee, a reminder of endurance and stability. Imagine a world where each animal you see is not just background, but kin, where the cry of an eagle is a prayer answered, the tracks of a wolf, a lesson in loyalty, the slow steps of a turtle, a reminder of patience. This was the native vision. Animals as mirrors, as relatives, as sacred presences woven into the circle of life. The secret here is not superstition, it is relationship. By seeing animals as kin, the native peoples shaped a world where respect guided survival, where reverence shaped behavior, where the boundary between human and animal blurred into kinship. Close your eyes and picture it: the beat of hooves across the plains, the shadow of wings across the sky, the low growl of a bear in the forest. These are not distant sounds. They are voices in the great conversation of life, voices the native peoples never forgot how to hear. To live in the Americas before conquest was to live inside a living classroom. Every tree, every river, every cloud carried a lesson. The native peoples did not treat nature as something outside themselves. They were not above it, nor below it. They were woven into it, like one thread in a great fabric. To be alive was to belong to the land, the sky, the water, the seasons. Among the Pacific Northwest nations, great cedar trees were called longhouse trees. From them came canoes, homes, totems, and tools. When a tree was cut, prayers were offered, gratitude spoken. The tree was not material, it was kin, and to take its body was to honor its spirit. Nothing was wasted, because waste was disrespect. On the plains, every hunt was balanced with reverence. Hunters prayed before taking a bison, offering thanks and promising to use every part. In return, the herds provided food, shelter, and tools that sustained entire nations. Survival was never extraction, it was exchange. In the Andes, people built terraces not to conquer mountains, but to live with them. By carving steps into slopes, they turned stone giants into partners, yielding harvests without destroying their shape. Water was guided gently, stored, and respected. Agriculture was not war against the earth, it was conversation. Even in deserts, where survival seemed impossible, the Pueblo and Hopi created harmony. They built homes that breathed with the seasons, thick adobe walls keeping warmth in winter and coolness in summer. They read the sky, watching stars and clouds, knowing when rain might come. To them, the desert was not barren. It was alive with subtle gifts. This vision of integration was more than survival, it was philosophy. To live with nature was to recognize cycles, birth, growth, decay, renewal. Death was not an end, but a return. Seasons were not inconveniences, but teachers. Storms were not curses, but reminders of power greater than human will. Imagine yourself standing in a forest at dawn. The mist curls around trunks, the air smells of earth, birds call across branches. In the native view, you are not an intruder here. You are part of the breath of the forest. Your footsteps are not separate from the rhythm of wind and water. You are not visitor, but relative. This world view carried responsibility. To pollute a river was to harm a living being. To cut too many trees was to wound family. To take more than needed was to break the circle of reciprocity. Every choice was weighed not only for the present, but for the unborn. Today, as the world struggles with imbalance, these teachings return with urgency. Climate scientists speak of sustainability, resilience, and balance concepts, long practiced in native traditions. What modern words call ecology, the ancestors called respect. The secret here is simple yet profound. Survival is not mastery, but harmony. To live is not to stand apart from nature, but to walk within it, to listen, to give as much as you take, to remember that the earth is not background, it is family. Close your eyes for a moment and breathe deeply. That air is not yours alone. It is gift, it is connection, it is reminder. And in that breath, you step into the same circle the native peoples walked for centuries, a circle of life without edges. If words carried memory and rituals carried balance, then art carried the soul. For the native peoples of the Americas, art was never separate from life. Every pot, every mask, every woven pattern was more than decoration. It was a language of symbols, a mirror of spirit, a vessel of story. Consider pottery. Among the Pueblo peoples of the Southwest, clay was gathered with prayers, shaped with care, and painted with designs that told of rain, corn, clouds, and the sacred directions. To drink from such a vessel was to hold the world in your hands. The patterns were not random, they were maps of belonging. Each curve and line carried memory from ancestors, each piece connecting daily survival with eternal meaning. In the Pacific Northwest, towering totem poles rose from cedar logs, carved with animals, spirits, and ancestors. These were not idols to be worshipped, but chronicles, visual genealogies, that recorded family lineage, clan history, and cosmic myths. To stand before a pole was to read a library of stories, etched in wood and color. Masks, too, were thresholds. In ceremonies, when a dancer put on the face of an animal spirit, they did not pretend they became. The mask was alive, carrying the presence of the being it represented. A jaguar mask roared with jungle power. An eagle mask spread wings of vision. Through art, the line between human and spirit blurred, and woven cloth spoke in silence. The Inca wove textiles so fine that they were more valuable than gold. Patterns carried codes of identity, geography, and status. In Mesoamerica, featherwork shimmered with iridescent beauty, each feather placed with precision to mirror the colors of sky and Sunday. These garments were not simply clothing. They were moving prayers, offerings of beauty to the divine. Even the body itself was a canvas. Tattoos, paint, and adornments were not vanity but ritual. Red ochre marked warriors for battle. White clay painted dancers in ceremony. Beads, shells, and turquoise carried protective power. Each design told others who you were, what you carried, what spirits walked with you. Imagine entering a plaza where dancers whirl in feathers, drums thunder, masks flash in firelight, and every garment shines with symbols. It is not performance for entertainment, it is a living text, a sacred story told through color, movement, and form. What makes this art remarkable is not only its beauty, but its endurance. Even when ceremonies were banned, art survived. Designs were hidden in baskets, patterns whispered into cloth, songs carved into tools. And today, these forms still breathe. Native artists continue to paint, carve, weave, and dance, not as echoes of the past, but as voices of the present, carrying symbols forward. The secret here is that art was never art in the modern sense. It was knowledge, it was law, it was prayer. It was the way a people remembered themselves and told the universe who they were. Close your eyes now and imagine a single pattern, spirals like rivers, triangles like mountains, circles like suns. That pattern is not only shape, it is story. And it whispers still, we are here, we endure, we belong. Every people, everywhere, has lifted their eyes to the sky and asked, who made this? The native peoples of the Americas were no different. Yet the gods they remembered were not distant kings on thrones of clouds. They were close, woven into mountains, rivers, animals, and stars. Their presence was not abstract theology, but lived reality. To walk the earth was to walk among spirits and gods who shaped, taught, punished, and blessed. The Aztec told of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. He was creator, teacher, patron of knowledge and wind. His body joined opposites, serpent of the earth and feathers of the sky, binding ground and heaven together. Legends say he descended into the underworld to gather bones of past humans, sprinkling them with his own blood to create life anew. Quetzalcoatl's wisdom was not only myth, it guided rulers, shaped rituals, and explained why humans must sacrifice, not to appease cruelty, but to maintain the balance of the cosmos. In Maya cosmology, gods lived within cycles of time. The Popol Vuh tells of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, who faced the lords of death in Xibalba, the underworld. Their journey was more than an adventure, it was cosmic instruction. By trickery, courage, and sacrifice, they transformed into the sun and moon, ensuring light's return after darkness. Through them, the Maya remembered that the universe was not chaos, but cycle death birthing life, night yielding to day. The Inca revered Inti, the sun god, father of emperors. His light gave maize. His warmth ensured life on icy peaks. Festivals like Inti Raymi filled Cusco with song and dance, golden discs reflecting sunlight into temples. Yet the Inca also honored Pachamama, the Earth Mother, who received libations of chicha before each drink, who accepted offerings before every harvest. To live without gratitude to Pachamama was unthinkable. She was not myth alone, but ground beneath every footstep. In the far north, Inuit stories told of Sedna, goddess of the sea, who lived beneath the waves, her hair tangled with creatures she ruled. Hunters prayed to her before seeking seals and whales. When storms came or food grew scarce, shamans traveled in spirit to comb her hair, soothing her anger, restoring balance. Here the divine was not in distant stars, but in icy waters that sustained or starved. For the Lakota and Plains peoples, Wakang Tianka, the great mystery, was not a single figure, but a sacred force present in all things. The buffalo, the eagle, the storm cloud, all were expressions of this vast mystery. Rituals like the sun dance bound participants to this power, reminding them that humans were not masters, but children of a larger sacred family. These gods were not just objects of worship. They were teachers of ethics, models for behavior, and guardians of balance. Quetzalcoatl reminded people that wisdom and sacrifice were necessary for creation. Pachamama reminded them to give back what they took. Sedna taught that greed or disrespect would anger the sea and endanger survival. The hero twins taught that courage and cleverness could transform even death into renewal. The gods were also woven into landscape. A mountain was not like a god, it was a god. Rivers carried divine presence. Sacred caves were mouths of the underworld. To enter them was to cross thresholds, to step into other realms. Every journey across land was also a journey across sacred geography, each step charged with meaning. And even in tragedy, the gods remained present. When European conquest destroyed temples, burned codices, and silenced rituals, the people did not forget. They carried gods in memory, disguised rituals as festivals, hid prayers in Catholic hymns. A saint's statue might conceal Pachamama. A Christian cross might secretly echo the four directions of older cosmology. Syncretism was survival, the gods living on beneath borrowed names. Imagine yourself standing in Tenochtitlan as dawn breaks. Priests climb temple steps, incense curls skyward, conch shells sound. To the people gathered, the rising sun is not just light, it is Inti, Quetzalcoatl, the hero twins reborn. Every ritual is not performance, but cosmic maintenance, ensuring the universe continues. Without it, the world itself could collapse. Or imagine a Hopi kiva, a round chamber underground. Dancers emerge in kachina masks, embodying spirits of rain, fertility, and ancestors. They are not pretending they are those beings. For a time, children watch, knowing they are in the presence of gods disguised in human form. The line between human and divine dissolves, leaving only relationship. The memory of these gods still lingers. In the Andes, offerings of coca leaves are still given to Pachamama. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos blends Catholic and Aztec visions, honoring the dead as travelers between worlds. In the far north, Inuit still tells Sedna's stories, her hair flowing in Arctic waters. These are not relics of vanished cultures. They are living currents, flowing beneath modern life, whispering that the divine is never far. The secret here is not only that gods once walked among people, but that they never left. They are in mountains, in rivers, in the cycle of corn and rain, in the stories still told by grandmothers at night. To remember them is to remember that the sacred is not elsewhere. It is here, in the land beneath your feet, in the sky above your head, in the breath you draw at this very moment. Close your eyes now and imagine. The serpent rising with feathers of light, the sun spreading warmth like golden hands, the sea's goddess watching with hair heavy with wails. These are not distant memories. They are echoes, still alive, waiting for us to listen. It is tempting to think of native peoples only in the past tense, as vanished civilizations, as lost cities, as cultures preserved only in museums and books. Yet, this is one of the great mistakes of modern imagination. The native peoples of the Americas are not ghosts of history. They are alive. Their children walk city streets and desert paths. Their songs still rise in powwows and ceremonies. Their languages are being spoken again by voices once silenced. The story did not end. It continues, in ways quiet and powerful. Across North America, powwows gather people in circles of drum and dance. Women in jingle dresses step with bells that shimmer like rainfall. Men in eagle feather bustles whirl, their movements prayers as much as performance. Children follow, learning not only the steps, but the meanings, respect, community, connection. For many, these gatherings are more than festivals. They are acts of survival, declarations that traditions endure. Each song is a thread tying today to ancestors. Each beat of the drum, a heartbeat carried forward. In the Andes, Quechua and Aymara farmers still plant potatoes on ancient terraces. They pour chicha beer onto the ground before drinking, honoring Pachamama as their grandparents did. Festivals fill highland towns with music and color, where dancers wear masks of condors, bears, and spirits of the mountains. Though colonization tried to erase these practices, the rituals remain, sometimes hidden beneath Catholic names, sometimes openly flourishing. To walk through such festivals is to realize that the old gods and the old ways are not gone. They live in every step, every drumbeat, every sip of shared drink. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos has become famous around the world. Families build altars with candles, food, and photos, welcoming the dead back for one night. The practice blends Catholic All Saints' Day with Aztec traditions of honoring ancestors. Behind the bright marigolds and painted skulls lies a truth. Memory is not a graveyard. Memory is a bridge. The dead walk with the living, and families continue to speak to them, feed them, love them. This is the survival of native worldview in modern form. Language, too, is returning. For generations, children in residential schools were beaten for speaking their mother tongues. Elders whispered words in secret, afraid they would be lost. And yet, today, revival movements grow. Young Lakota speakers sing lullabies once silenced. In Canada, Cree and Ojibwe programs teach language in classrooms and online. In Peru, Quechua is spoken in universities and broadcast on radio stations. Every word spoken is not only sound, it is resistance, reclamation, and rebirth. Women are often at the heart of this revival. Grandmothers teach weaving patterns, mothers cook traditional meals, daughters learn songs once forbidden. In their hands, continuity is woven, cooked, sung. Native women today also lead political struggles, defending water from pipelines, protecting forests from mining, demanding justice for missing and murdered sisters. Their activism echoes the strength of ancestors, proving that survival is not only cultural but also political. Native art thrives as well. Painters, filmmakers, and writers tell stories of resilience. They weave traditional symbols with modern voices. A mask carved from cedar today may carry both ancient patterns and contemporary commentary. A novel written in English might echo rhythms of oral storytelling, turning literature into ceremony. In music, native hip-hop artists blend drum beats with modern beats, carrying old identities into new forms. But survival is not without struggle. Poverty, displacement, and the wounds of colonization still weigh heavily. Many reservations face lack of resources, systemic injustice, and health crises. Yet even in these hardships, strength emerges. Community gardens revive traditional foods. Healing circles address generational trauma. Elders teach that survival is not just about living, it is about remembering who you are. Think of the Lakota phrase, mitakuye o yazing, all my relations. It still guides lives today. Young activists invoke it in climate marches, reminding the world that the earth is family, not property. Farmers recall it when they save seeds, knowing food is kin. Musicians sing it, reminding audiences that every note, every dance, every breath is part of one circle. The descendants of the great civilizations are not relics. They are neighbors, teachers, protectors. They are children playing in powwow circles, students learning forgotten words, leaders demanding justice. They are the living proof that history never truly ends, that memory cannot be erased, that culture can be broken but never destroyed. Imagine walking into a modern city, skyscrapers overhead, traffic humming, and then, in a park, a group gathers with drums. Children wear regalia, elders bless the space, songs rise into the air, passers-by stop, watching. What they see is not just performance, it is presence. It is the voice of ancestors refusing to fade. Or picture a farmer in the Andes, his hands rough from soil, planting potatoes on terraces built by Inca engineers centuries ago. Each seed is not only food, it is history planted again, a quiet act of continuity that sustains both body and culture. Or imagine a classroom where a teacher greets students in a language once nearly extinct. The children respond, smiling, carrying forward syllables their great-grandparents were forbidden to speak. Each word is victory. Each sentence is survival. The secret here is not only that the native peoples survived conquest and colonization, it is that they continue to shape the world today. The foods we eat, the words we speak, the ceremonies we share, so many roots lead back to them. And their descendants, far from fading, are rising to remind us all of the wisdom we nearly forgot, that the earth is alive, that memory is sacred, that community is strength. Close your eyes and imagine their presence now. A grandmother's lullaby in Lakota, a child's laughter in Quechua, a dancer's footsteps in an open plaza. These are not echoes of the past. They are voices of the present. They are the living descendants of nations that endure. And they remind us, history is not behind us. It walks beside us. There are some kinds of knowledge that seem to vanish, buried by time, crushed by conquest, dismissed as superstition. And yet, like seeds lying dormant beneath snow, waiting for spring, they are never truly gone. Among the native peoples of the Americas, so much wisdom was silenced. About medicine, agriculture, astronomy, ecology, even philosophy. But silence is not the same as death. Today, these forgotten knowledges stir once more. They are rising, whispered by elders, researched by scientists, embraced by a world finally beginning to understand that primitive knowledge was never primitive at all. Take agriculture. For centuries, Western systems treated farming as domination. Plow deep, extract, expand. Yet the soil grows tired, the rains falter, the land resists. Now, agronomists look again to the techniques of native farmers. The three sisters planting of corn, beans, and squash, once dismissed as simple, has become a model of sustainable polyculture. Corn provides a stalk for beans to climb. Beans fix nitrogen, enriching soil. Squash spreads wide, shading the ground, conserving moisture. Together, they feed each other, creating resilience no monoculture can match. What was once seen as folklore is now science, taught in universities. Andean terraces, too, once thought of as relics, are now admired as engineering marvels. Their stones capture heat, extending growing seasons. Their layers prevent erosion. Their steps turn mountains into gardens. Modern farmers rediscover that these terraces can endure droughts and floods better than industrial fields. What was once forgotten is now blueprint. Medicine follows the same story. For generations, shamans and healers were ridiculed. Their herbs were called witchcraft, their ceremonies dismissed as superstition. Yet pharmaceutical companies today scour rainforests, searching for compounds hidden in leaves and roots. Willow bark, used by native peoples to ease pain, gave us aspirin. Cinchona bark, brewed by Andean healers, gave us quinine against malaria. Even ayahuasca, long regarded with suspicion, is now studied for its potential to treat trauma and depression. But the wisdom was never only chemical. Healing was holistic: body, mind, spirit, community. A patient was not an isolated individual, but part of a web. To heal one person was to heal family, land, and memory. Modern science, with its growing interest in holistic health, echoes truths the native peoples always knew. Astronomy, too, is re-emerging. The Maya tracked celestial cycles with astonishing precision, predicting eclipses, aligning temples with solstices. For centuries, Europeans claimed such knowledge impossible without telescopes. But the stars need no telescope when you watch them night after night, generation after generation, recording patterns in stories and stone. Today, astrophysicists confirm the accuracy of Maya calendars, the alignment of Inca sites, the geometry of Chaco Canyon. What was forgotten as myth returns as mathematics. Even ecology carries their voice. The Haudenosaunee principle of making decisions for the seventh generation is now quoted in climate activism. Native fire management practices, controlled burns that reduce risk and renew ecosystems, are being reintroduced in California and Australia after wildfires proved the cost of forgetting. Hunters once mocked for rituals of respect are now praised for sustainable models of conservation. But not all knowledge is rediscovered by science. Much returns through memory. In villages, elders pass on words once forbidden in schools. In kitchens, mothers cook stews of maize and squash, teaching recipes that carry identity. In ceremonies, dancers wear masks and feathers, embodying spirits long thought suppressed. These are not relics, they are acts of resurrection. And art carries knowledge too. Basket weavers encode stories in patterns, just as their ancestors did. Potters paint symbols of rain and fertility. Singers revive old songs, setting them to new rhythms. Knowledge is not always written. It lives in hands, in voices, in bodies moving in circles. Imagine standing in an Andean village at planting season. Farmers gather, not with machines, but with songs. They dig terraces, place seeds, pour chicha to Pachamama. To the outsider, it might look quaint. But beneath the chants lies knowledge of soil chemistry, of climate rhythms, of ecological balance. And beneath that knowledge lies philosophy, gratitude, reciprocity, respect. Or picture a healer in the Amazon forest. She picks leaves, brews a bitter drink, sings over the patient. Science might analyze compounds, measure brain chemistry, but something more is happening. The song, the touch, the presence of community. Healing here is not transaction, it is transformation. Or imagine a child in a classroom, repeating words in a language her grandmother was forbidden to speak. Each syllable is a seed. Each sentence is reclamation. The knowledge returning is not only practical, but spiritual. The knowledge of who you are. The secret here is that forgotten knowledge never truly dies. It waits patient, like rivers under ice, like roots beneath soil. Colonizers tried to erase it with fire, law, and silence. Yet it endured, carried in whispers, in dreams, in the stubborn survival of seeds and songs. Now, in an age of crisis, climate change, ecological collapse, spiritual hunger, the world looks again to what it once dismissed. The native peoples remind us, knowledge is not conquest, it is relationship. The land teaches, the sky teaches, the ancestors teach. To remember is to listen. And when we listen, we hear what was always there. Close your eyes and imagine forgotten voices rising. The rustle of corn in the wind, the chant of healers over herbs, the alignment of temples with stars, the laughter of children speaking ancient words anew. These are not echoes. They are the return of knowledge that refuses to die. The past is not gone. It is returning, and its return is not only for native peoples. It is for all who seek balance, wisdom, and survival in a world that desperately needs them. The circle is nearly complete. We have walked through stories of the earth and sky, through myths and songs, through medicine, farming, art, and memory. We have stood in lost cities, listened to whispers of animals, honored the strength of women, and faced the tragedies that still echo. And now, at the quiet end of this long journey, we pause to ask, what do these secrets of the native peoples mean for us, here, now? The first truth is that history is not finished. Too often, we are taught to think of native peoples as past tense. They were, they built, they believed. But the truth is, they are. Their descendants live, breathe, sing, plant, resist. Every powwow drumbeat, every Quechua lullaby, every Hopi dance is not nostalgia, it is continuity. The past flows into the present, and the present flows forward, carrying seeds of survival into the future. The second truth is that wisdom does not expire. The science of the Three Sisters still nourishes fields today. The philosophy of all my relations still guides ecological ethics. The ceremonies of balance still remind us that health is not only of body, but of community and earth. What the world often dismissed as superstition is reappearing in laboratories, in climate science, in psychology. What was silenced rises again, because truth does not vanish. It waits to be remembered. And the third truth is perhaps the most personal. These stories are not only about time, they are also about us. They invite us to see ourselves differently, not as masters of the earth, but as participants in a circle. They invite us to ask, what does it mean to live with respect? What does it mean to belong to the land rather than own it? What does it mean to carry responsibility for generations not yet born? Imagine yourself again, sitting by the fire as night deepens. The stars above are bright, scattered like beads across dark cloth. An elder finishes the last story of the night, his voice low, his eyes shining. He tells you that the earth is alive, that the sky listens, that your breath itself is part of the great conversation of life. The fire crackles, the circle is quiet, and then he asks you, what will you do with this knowledge? It is not a question for scholars or leaders alone. It is a question for each of us. Will we treat the world as commodity or as kin? Will we continue the silence of forgetting, or will we remember? Will we pass these stories to the children who come after us, or will we let them fade once more into ash? The answer cannot come quickly. Like the stories of the native peoples themselves, it must live in memory, in reflection, in practice. To honor these secrets is not to repeat them word for word. It is to live them, to plant with care, to take only what you need, to share generously, to remember that rivers, animals, and skies are relatives, not strangers. And so we arrive at the closing, though perhaps it is not an ending at all. The secrets of the native peoples are not locked in the past. They are living invitations to walk differently. They remind us that wisdom can be carried in a drumbeat, in a prayer, in the way you plant a seed. They remind us that tragedy can wound, but not erase, that silence can cover, but not kill. They remind us that survival is not only endurance, it is transformation, adaptation, and hope. The question now is not whether these secrets matter. It is whether we are listening. So as you drift into sleep, let the images return. The serpent shadow slithering down a Maya pyramid at equinox, the terraced mountains of the Andes glowing at dawn, the drumbeat echoing across the plains, the eagle soaring with prayers in its wings. Let them linger like dreams, reminding you that you, too, are part of this circle. And tomorrow, when you wake, perhaps you will carry one small change, a softer step on the earth, a word of gratitude whispered to the sky, a deeper sense that you are not alone, that you walk with ancestors, with spirits, with the living memory of countless generations. Because the secrets are not really secrets at all. They are reminders, and now they belong to you too. Wind down. Take one more deep breath. Let your shoulders rest. Let the weight of the day drift away. You are safe. You are part of something vast and ancient. The circle is wide, and you belong inside it. As you fall asleep, may you carry with you the strength of the ancestors, the songs of the earth, and the peace of knowing that the story continues. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with light, with voices of kindness, and with the quiet wisdom of the native peoples, who remind us that we are never apart from the great circle of life.